Right guys, video for you after the super heavyweight Olympic final between Joyce and Tony Yoka. I've just sat down to watch the fight. I've also seen afterwards there being some controversy over the result. Anthony Joshua said that he felt that Joyce had won the fight. I believe several members of the BBC commentary team said the same opinion, and I'm recording this a few seconds after the fight, so I don't know what the public reaction is. I'm sure Twitter's going mental with people saying that Joyce has been robbed. And let me start by saying this was a clash of styles here. Joyce, definitely the aggressor in the ring. Joyce, definitely the come forward fighter. Definitely the high output fighter. Quite possibly, very possibly, the harder puncher in there. And I guess that is why a lot of people would potentially think Joyce won this fight. At the end of the day, he looked to be a bigger, stronger, more powerful man who was coming forward, pushing the pace and throwing more punches. And 7 out of 10 people who watch a boxing fight, that's probably enough for them to say Joyce won the fight. I personally believe that Joyce won the first round, but I believe that the opponent, Tony Yoka, won the second and third rounds. I was actually quite surprised when it looked like the judges had given Joyce, had given the opponent, Tony Yoka, the first round, because I did think Joyce's volume was enough to take that round. Joyce, for me, and I did a video on this before in the preliminary round, is not the smartest boxer out there. He is not the best technician you'll see in the amateurs. The way he constructs his punches is very amateurish for me. You can tell that he came to boxing late. You can tell that his background is in other sports. It's not an instinctive thing that you see when someone's been boxing since the age of 7 or 8, for example. Even the way he throws his jab, for me, he doesn't construct his jab properly. It's not a snappy jab. He kind of almost chucks it out like that, and he doesn't bring it back as well. His jab, to me, is sloppy. His boxing skills from the outside are average. His defence is questionable. You know, his opponent, who for me seemed to be the far better technician in terms of his boxing, was when he was throwing punches, and he was throwing less punches than Joyce, but I would imagine his opponent had a higher accuracy rate because it wasn't hard to hit Joyce. You know, Joyce would throw a sloppy, lazy jab, he might miss, and then he'd leave himself exposed, and towards the end of the fight, we actually saw his opponent start to counterpunch him a bit more and catch him as Joyce himself was throwing. The opponent, Tony Yoka, a younger guy, 24 years old, and he was slightly lower volume than Joyce. He had a bigger, aggressive guy coming at him, pushing him back, and he was lower volume, but he was picking his spots nicely, and he was working behind sharper work from the outside. He was throwing a jab, he was throwing straight, crisp punches from the outside, and I did think, whilst Joyce certainly won the battle of the quantity, Tony Yoka won the battle of the quality, as far as I'm concerned. Joyce threw a lot of volume, but Yoka was defensively a lot more sound than Joyce for me. His head wasn't as upright and unguarded as Joyce's, and I thought a lot of Joyce's volume was kind of punches that were landing on the guard, on the elbows, on the gloves of Tony Yoka, rather than being crisp, clean scoring shots. So I actually felt, on balance, that the result was fair, and to be honest, it didn't surprise me that it went this way. Guys who watched my video early on in the tournament would have known that I did say I would have been surprised if Joyce did win the gold medal, because put simply, I don't think his work is crisp and technically sound enough. Now, Joyce has a lot to like about him. He looks like the kind of guy who will carry a decent power when he puts on those smaller gloves in the pro ranks. He's a big guy. He's got very, very high volume, which is rare for a heavyweight, especially a big heavyweight. He also seems to go well to the body. I really like it when I see a heavyweight not neglecting the body, and in this fight, Joyce dropped several times and landed with decent snap to Tony Yoka's body, and I really like that. It may be that Joyce and his style is actually better suited to the pro ranks than to the amateur ranks. But fundamentally, when you have got a style that involves some inaccuracy, some swinging and missing, some come forward tactics where you're defensively open, you're throwing wide punches, and you're getting hit by a guy who's got a snappier jab and sharper straight punches, especially in amateur boxing. And I don't watch a lot of amateur boxing, but my perception is that you leave yourself open to questionable decisions. If you're a guy who comes forward throwing wide punches and you've got another guy on the back foot picking away with the jab, you leave yourself open to decisions like this if you fight within that manner. And for me, looking at Joyce, I know he's 30 years old. For me, he may actually have the style to suit the pro game a bit more than the amateurs based on this. Tony Yoka, I don't know if he's planning to go pro. For me, he could be a very, very smart prospect because he's 6 years younger than Joyce. And the other thing the commentators referred to in the fight is that he'd done his ankle in the semi-finals. I think he'd fallen over on his ankle or something, and there was some suggestion that perhaps he wasn't able to move in the ring like he normally was able to move. But he handled the pressure of Joyce well. The commentators kept making out, I don't know if it was British bias or something, the commentators kept making out that Yoka was hurt. I didn't actually see Joyce hurting Yoka. I saw Joyce as the bigger puncher, and I saw him pushing back Yoka, but I'm not sure I ever saw Tony Yoka really hurt in the fight. And I thought he dealt with the pressure Joyce was bringing rather well. I thought his defences were quite tight. I thought his straight punches were really nice. And if he can add a lot more lateral movement to that, if his ankle was legitimately injured, he could be a real prospect to follow in the pro ranks. And with the fact he's 24, he's got a lot higher upside. There's a lot more potential for him to improve. So he's certainly one I'd keep my eye on. As for Joyce, if we look at British Olympians, I know some of them have a bad name, but if we look at Audley Harrison, if we look at David Price, if we look at Anthony Joshua, for me those are three guys, all of whom are potentially better amateurs than Joyce. The styles of their fighting tend to be outside boxers leading with a jab, trying to keep distance, trying to stay on the outside, trying to keep range. And for me, and as I say, I'm not an expert on amateur boxing whatsoever, as you can probably tell, but for me, that sort of style and that sort of methodology of fighting is better in the amateur ranks than Joyce's style. Let me put it this way: David Price and Audley Harrison would be better amateur boxers than Dillian Whyte and Derek Chisora, as far as I'm concerned, because of a stylistic thing. Now, Joyce in the pro ranks, it's going to be interesting, and when he puts on those little gloves, we may start seeing him going on a tear of knockouts, especially if he can keep that body punching up and that high output, because for me that was really, really interesting. But at this stage, and given how late he's come to the game, I'm going to be honest, and if I look at his level, I see him as someone who could maybe win a British title, maybe win a European title on a very, very, very good day. I'm struggling. I really don't want to write someone off before they've even started their pro career. But the fundamentals for me are not there in terms of winning a pro title. The guy's 30, and to my eye, he's not constructing a jab properly. The guy's 30, and he doesn't seem to be defensively sound. So there is an element of you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And whilst he will improve for the switch to the pros, I'm sure, am I looking at him and seeing a Vladimir Klitschko, a Lennox Lewis, an Anthony Joshua? Am I looking and seeing someone who's making this change from amateur stardom to pro stardom? Possibly not. Could Joyce be in the mix in a year or two's time with Dave Allen's, the Derek Chisoras, the Dillian Whytes, the David Prices? Absolutely. He does a lot of things that could bother a lot of fighters like that. But can I see him taking it to the next level? Can I see him having that well-rounded skill set to move from that sort of level up to the Tyson Furies and Anthony Joshuas and Deontay Wilders of this world? Probably not. I think in the pro game, when you've got guys with advanced movement, when you've got guys with advanced jabs, when you've got guys with slippery, slick head movement and back foot game, I think he may struggle and he may look a bit basic at times. But there's a lot to like about Joyce. He, as I say, come forward, very aggressive, high output, good body puncher, and to my eye, when he gets the smaller gloves on, he may just well turn out to be. Don't be surprised if he goes 10-0 with 10 knockouts, something like that. That'd be my prediction. Tony Yoka, it was a close fight. Just like I'm saying Joyce left himself open to losing the decision by the style of fight, Tony Yoka also left himself open to losing the fight due to his lack of output. And I'm interested to see what the public perception is here. I'm interested to see if the vast majority of people think that Joyce was robbed. When I did my initial video on Joyce, when I said I wasn't exactly bowled over by him, it was one of them videos that I recorded where I was expecting everyone to come out and say, "You're an idiot, Joyce is the best thing since sliced bread." And I was actually rather taken back by the stream of comments of people agreeing with me. So maybe people agree with me here as well. And I want to know your thoughts as to this fight. I've got 3 questions for you if you want to ask them in the comments. Who won the fight? How far does Joyce go in the pros? And how far does Tony Yoka go in the pros? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I think not only did Tony Yoka just about deserve to win this fight, if I'm honest, I think he's got a lot higher upside than Joyce. I think he's obviously a younger guy, which makes a huge difference in terms of potential for improvement. Also, I think the technical fundamentals are there. And with Joyce, very tough, very aggressive. Will he win a world title with that jab and that lack of defence? Questionable. Let me know your thoughts, guys. If you've enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, please do take the time to subscribe. Many thanks indeed for watching. I do appreciate it.